Drink Pepsi Black for max taste, no sugar Pepsi Black. Time 12 hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by demerarawaves.com.
A very good day to you with the news at this time. I am Tiana Jordan. To begin the news, here is a look at the lead stories. ExxonMobil, the operator in Guyana's prolific Stabroek block, will be exploring for oil at a new prospect named Fangtooth, not far from the Liza well. The governments of Guyana and Suriname are requiring bidders to build the Quarantine Bridge to submit a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain bids. The MV Kanawaima is fully operational again between Guyana and Suriname, plying the route once daily. A 47-year-old Mahaica cyclist was killed by an allegedly speeding 61-year-old minibus driver. In regional news, the controversial former head of the Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries, Kevin Smith, was a convicted sex offender in Canada. Since July this year, 9 fully vaccinated foreign nationals who traveled to Grenada tested positive for COVID-19. And internationally, the African Union has suspended Sudan from all of its activities following a coup there. The bloc wants the restoration of Sudan's civilian-led transitional authority. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Not seeing returns on your dollar? Then advertise with News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM and see results. We give you competitive rates, wide coverage, appealing programs, streaming online worldwide on dem waves, and we give you value for your money. You'll see returns when you advertise with us. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 for those competitive rates. 103.1 FM, accurate information blended with great music.
And now the news in detail. CoVenture and Hess say ExxonMobil, the operator in Guyana's prolific Stabroek block, will be exploring for oil at a new prospect named Fangtooth, not far from the Liza well. Hess says the Stena Drill Max left the Stabroek block following the completion of the Whiptail 1 well and will return in the fourth quarter to drill the Fangtooth prospect. Fangtooth is located 9 miles northwest of Liza 1, from which oil is already being produced. Detailing its production so far from Liza 1, Hess says its net production from the Liza field was 32,000 barrels per day in the third quarter of 2021, compared with 19,000 barrels per day in the prior year. In terms of future developments in the Stabroek block, the Liza Unity FPSO, with an expected capacity of 220,000 gross barrels per day, arrived at the Stabroek block on October 25th, and startup of Phase 2 of the Liza field development remains on track for early 2022. The third development, Payara, will utilize the Prosperity FPSO with an expected capacity of 220,000 gross barrels per day. First oil is expected in 2024. A fourth development, Yellowtail, has been identified on the Stabroek block with anticipated startup in 2025, pending government approvals and project sanctioning. Since July, the operator, Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, has announced the 19th, 20th and 21st significant discoveries at Whiptail, Pinktail and Catterbuck. Earlier this month, increased the gross discovered recoverable resource estimate for the block to approximately 10 billion, up from the previous estimate of more than 9 billion. The governments of Guyana and Suriname have adjusted the intended tender procedure for the construction of the Quarantine Bridge. The previous tender procedure entails design and feasibility study. Minister of Public Works Guyana, Juan Edgel, has confirmed that an agreement was reached to adjust.
The bridge is going to be a design, build, finance, operate, maintain model. So there is a change in the scope, and we're inviting bidders to put in proposals for a design, build, finance, operate, maintain model.
In this model, an investor will come in with both the design and the financing. This was decided during President Santoki's recent visit to neighboring Guyana. The current assignment for 8 selected consultancies will be adapted to provide all preliminary studies, preliminary designs, preparation and marketing of the intended public-private partnership agreement. Agencies have until December 15, 2021 to submit their bids. The Quarantine Bridge will connect South Drain in Suriname and Molson Creek in Guyana. The Guyana government has already commenced building and upgrading the access road that will lead to the location of the bridge. The agreement between the two countries for the construction of the bridge was endorsed in a statement by Santoki and President Ali in August. The Ministry of Public Works has confirmed that the MV Kanuaima is fully operational again between Guyana and Suriname. Public Works Minister Juan Edgel says the ferry began plying the route between Molson Creek, Guyana and South Drain, Suriname on Monday, October 24th. Minister Edgel says the arrangement that existed previously between the two countries continues, and the MV Sandaka has been pulled from servicing the route, which was a temporary arrangement. The ferry connection itself was discontinued in March 2020 after Suriname registered the first COVID-19 infections and closed the borders. When the connection was restarted, the ferry Kanuaima could not be used due to technical problems. The Kanuaima was taken out of service in December last year and has since undergone a major overhaul. The cost of the ferry's repair has been shared between Suriname and Guyana. The Kanuaima now sails once a day to and from Suriname. Leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, LJP, Lennox Schumann, in his capacity as Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, has written to President Ali to appoint a substantive Chancellor, Chief Justice, Commissioner of Police, and the Chief of Staff. The Deputy Speaker is concerned that the non-appointment of substantive officials or confirmation of those acting in the offices weakens the state and asks President Ali to rectify the situation. Mr. Schumann calls on President Ali to urgently confer with the leader of the opposition with a view to securing his agreement for substantive appointments to the 4 positions. Mr. Schumann urged that the failure to rectify the omission to fill these positions with substantive appointments means the continuing violation of the spirit and intent of the Constitution. Mr. Schumann, in his letter dated Friday, October 22, 2021, to President Ali, stated that there are 4 critical acting appointments, namely the Chief Justice, the Chancellor of the Judiciary, the Commissioner of Police, and the Chief of Staff. Mr. Schumann highlighted that after 1 year completed in office on August 2, 2021, the People's Progressive Party government has ignored calls by the previous president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron, and the current president, Justice Adrian Saunders, for the confirmation of substantive appointments of the Chancellor of the Judiciary and Chief Justice made under the previous administration. To date, there has been no movement on those critical appointments. Mr. Schuman reminded President Ali that in November 2017, Sir Dennis Byron, the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, called for the confirmation of the acting appointments of the Chancellor and Chief Justice. Sir Dennis had said then that the situation has moved well beyond what ought to be acceptable in a modern democracy where respect of the rule of law is maintained. Sir Dennis had previously said the Constitution envisages the judiciary of Guyana to be headed by officials who are substantively appointed and enjoy all the legal and institutional mechanism to secure their tenure. The former CCJ president had said that anything otherwise is a violation of the spirit and intent of the Constitution. The Alliance for Change, AFC, is seeking once again to remove the Regional Democratic Council, RDC, Vice Chairman Samuel Sandy by way of a no-confidence motion. The RDC is scheduled to meet for its statutory meeting on Thursday, October 28. The clerk of the council, Mr. Donald Gadraj, has written to the chairman of Region 4, Demerara Mahaika, Daniel Siram, informing him of the motion to be placed on the agenda. General Secretary of the AFC, David Patterson, confirmed to News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM that he is aware of the motion, which is to be placed on the agenda for the meeting on Thursday and debate at a subsequent date. Mr. Patterson has confirmed, too, that the impasse with the appointment of Sandy as Vice Chair instead of AFC's candidate, Nielsen Mackenzie, has not been resolved at the top leadership of the AFC and APNU. AFC contends that APNU reneged on an agreement for the two parties with the majority vote together to vote APNU for chair and AFC the vice chair position. At the time of voting with the casting vote needed, the chairman Siram voted for Sandy of the APNU instead of AFC's Nielsen Mackenzie. In correspondence seen by News Talk Radio, the regional chairman Daniel Siram has strongly reprimanded Mr. Gadraj for submitting the motions while informing that the method of submission was not in keeping with statutory provision, that he was out of order to inform the chairman of an agenda item when in fact the chairman sets the agenda. The regional chairman informed the regional executive officer that the motion was dismissed and will not make the agenda for Thursday's meeting. General Secretary of APNU had said on Friday, October 2020, a year ago, that the reversal of that decision for APNU's Samuel Sandy to be replaced by AFC's Nielsen Mackenzie would depend on talks between AFC leader Kemra Dramjatan and APNU chairman David Granger. The Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, GPHC, resumed offering various surgeries to patients. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says the health institution had stopped offering surgery except for emergencies during the COVID surge.
I think as additional precautions, we stopped taking in patients to do elective surgeries. Because in hospital setting, it can be challenging if you have infectious patients with COVID in that hospital setting, then they can infect the other people. We took it as a precautionary measure, but now, as you would have noticed over the last couple of weeks, we have seen a drop in cases. The hospital is going to start, they're going to resume doing elective surgery.
Dr. Anthony says the reduction in cases, the GPHC is working on a date to begin accepting appointments for surgeries. He urged that the COVID measures in place will be enforced to ensure COVID infections are kept at minimum or more so prevented. A 47-year-old cyclist was allegedly killed by a speeding minibus driver on the Mahaica public road last night at around 8 p.m. Police investigators say the minibus and driver were proceeding along the Strangoran public road, Mahaica East Coast, Demerara, when it was alleged by the 61-year-old driver that the cyclist Sibaran Dankumar suddenly turned in his path. The driver applied brakes to avoid a collision, but despite his efforts, he collided with the pedal cyclist. The 47-year-old cyclist was picked up and taken to the Maikoni Public Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The driver is in custody, assisting with the investigation. And now in regional news. Controversial former head of the Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries, Kevin Smith, was a convicted sex offender in Canada. Smith was convicted in 2007 of sexually assaulting a 21-year-old man. The incident occurred on November 5, 2007. Smith served 6 months in prison in Canada after he was convicted of the sex crime. He was given a 2-month discretionary probation period. Several other 10-year probation orders were also imposed on Smith. Questions have been raised in recent times about Smith's antecedents since he came to national attention in Jamaica 2 weeks ago following the alleged sacrificial killing of 2 people at his church in Montego Bay, St. James. There have been allegations about the nature of Smith's relationship with boys in Jamaica. The police in Jamaica say those allegations were being investigated. The Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries leader was to face wounding, gun, and murder charges in connection with the alleged sacrificial killings. However, Smith died in a motor vehicle accident yesterday while he was being transported to Kingston to be formally charged. The accident also claimed the life of a policeman, Constable Orlando Irons. 2 other policemen are in hospital being treated for serious injuries they sustained in the accident. The Barbados economy is projected to grow between 1 and 2% of gross domestic product, GDP, a slightly slower pace than the Central Bank of Barbados had earlier forecast, while the bank stressed that growth hinges on the continued recovery of tourism. The financial institution previously predicted growth of up to 3% for this year. Governor of the Central Bank, Cleviston Haynes, in the latest economic review for the first 9 months of the year says the economy declined by 3.2%, though growth of 10% was recorded for the July to September quarter when compared year on year. This is, as he stressed, the need for improved COVID-19 vaccination and growth in the tourism industry. Haynes says the forecast for growth this year and next remains sensitive to the overall outturn for tourism. The central bank governor says that the risk to the growth forecasts remain significant owing to the impact of the contagious Delta variant of the COVID-19 virus and the slower than anticipated vaccine rollout, caused in part by vaccine hesitancy. He maintained that the upside to having more people vaccinated against the pandemic included longer business hours, increased productivity, and reduced downtime associated with testing and contact tracing, revival of small businesses, accelerated job creation, and the normalization of educational services. Since Grenada began enforcing its policy that only fully vaccinated foreign nationals will be allowed into the country, there have been 9 passengers testing positive for COVID-19. As of July 31, 2021, all arriving passengers entering the country who were not nationals had to be fully vaccinated. Grenadian nationals and citizens were allowed entry without showing their vaccination status. The government changed its policy in July to control the spread of COVID-19 in Grenada. The new guidelines stipulated that outside of citizens and residents of Grenada, no one will be allowed to enter the country from July 31st unless they are fully vaccinated. Citizens and residents of Grenada can return whether vaccinated or unvaccinated. Records from the Ministry of Health showed that in August 2021, there were 5 fully vaccinated arrivals who tested positive, and there were 2 in September and 2 in October. The data also shows that there were 5 unvaccinated arrivals who tested positive in August, 4 in September, and 4 in October. Thousands of fully vaccinated visitors and unvaccinated nationals entered the island during the 3-month period. All arriving visitors who are fully vaccinated are mandated to be tested upon arrival at the Maurice Bishop International Airport and spend up to 48 hours in quarantine once there is a negative COVID-19 test result. Unvaccinated arrivals are required to spend up to 7 days in quarantine or until medically cleared if there is a positive result after taking the test at the airport. And now in international news, here's the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The African Union has suspended Sudan from all of its activities until the civilian-led transitional authority is restored. It said Monday's coup was unconstitutional. The World Bank has suspended aid. Demonstrations against the military takeover are continuing for a 3rd day in the capital Khartoum. Abdurrashid Khalifa is the spokesman for the Sudanese Banking Association, which is among a number of organisations taking part.
We believe that it is in the interest of the Sudanese people to have a democratic country, to have a stable government, and to have civilian-led government. And that's why, as Sudanese bankers, we stand firmly against any military and any form of dictatorship. We have tried this for the last 30 years, and it was very destructive to this country.
The European Union's top court says Poland must pay just over $1 million a day in penalties after it failed to comply with interim measures to suspend a controversial Supreme Court disciplinary chamber. The European Court of Justice said this risks causing serious and irreparable harm to the EU's legal order. Adam Easton is in Warsaw.
This certainly ups the stakes in this long-running dispute over its changes to the Polish judiciary, which Brussels says has essentially opened up Polish courts and judges to political influence. At a very sort of forthright debate on the rule of law in Poland at the European Parliament earlier this month, Poland's Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki defended his country's position, but he also said the government would abolish this chamber in its current shape. The thing is, it hasn't done so.
Opposition leaders in India have welcomed the Supreme Court's decision to probe allegations that the government used spyware to snoop on journalists, critics and politicians. A senior leader of the Congress Party, Rahul Gandhi, said the alleged use of Pegasus surveillance software was an attempt to crush India's democracy. The government says there's no substance to the accusations. Pakistan's Interior Minister says 3 police officers have been killed and 70 others wounded in clashes with members of a banned Islamist group near Lahore. Shamila Jaffrey reports.
Clashes broke out when thousands of supporters of the banned political party Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan confronted police on a highway in Punjab province. The police have dug trenches and put containers and other obstructions on major roads leading to the capital. The TLP's leader Saad Rizvi was arrested earlier this year for inciting violence against the government, and its members are demanding his release. They are also calling for the French ambassador to be expelled over the reprinting of caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad by a satirical magazine.
BBC News. Israel has advanced plans for the construction of more than 3,000 settler homes in the occupied West Bank, giving the final approval to 1,800 of them. The announcement follows the strongest public rebuke of Israeli policy to date from the Biden administration. The U.S. State Department has said it's deeply concerned by Israeli moves, adding that they're inconsistent with efforts to lower tensions and ensure calm. Gulf Arab countries have demanded an apology from Lebanon's Information Minister Georges Kordahi after he appeared to heavily criticise Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for their role in the war in Yemen. Tom Bateman reports from Beirut.
This is the latest spat in already strained relations between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. The Lebanese Information Minister made the comments in August, but they started being shared widely on social media this week. Mr. Kordahi had suggested the Saudis and the UAE were outside aggressors against the Houthis in Yemen. It sparked sharp criticism. The Saudi ambassador in Beirut said his words amounted to a diplomatic crisis, while the six-nation Gulf Cooperation Council condemned his comments and asked for an apology.
The Kremlin has criticised the use of Turkish-made drones by Ukraine's armed forces, saying they could destabilise the conflict in eastern Ukraine. It follows confirmation by Ukraine on Tuesday that it used one such drone for the first time to fire a missile at an artillery position used by Russian-backed separatists. Britain's economy is forecast to return to pre-COVID levels by the end of 2021, according to the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility. However, the OBR also warns of high inflation next year and only mediocre levels of economic growth in subsequent years. The forecasts were published as Britain's governing Conservative Party announced its plans for higher levels of public spending and taxation for the next 3 years.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. ExxonMobil, the operator in Guyana's prolific Stabroek block, will be exploring for oil at a new prospect named Fangtooth, not far from the Liza well. The governments of Guyana and Suriname are requiring bidders to build a quarantine bridge to submit a designed, build, finance, operate and maintain bids. The MV Kanawaima is fully operational again between Guyana and Suriname, plying the route once daily. A 47-year-old Mahaica cyclist was killed by an allegedly speeding 61-year-old minibus driver. In regional news, the controversial former head of the Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries, Kevin Smith, was a convicted sex offender in Canada. Since July this year, 9 fully vaccinated foreign nationals who traveled to Grenada tested positive for COVID-19. And internationally, the African Union has suspended Sudan from all of its activities following a coup there. The bloc wants the restoration of Sudan's civilian-led transitional authority. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.